One of the bright spots to come out of this past election, which was mostly bad news, was the election by the people of the state of Delaware of Sarah McBride, who, when she takes office in January, will become the member of Congress representing Delaware's at-large district in the House of Representatives, and she will be the first ever openly trans member of Congress. That's pretty cool. Unless, of course, you are a Republican and therefore, in all likelihood, a hateful, transphobic bigot. Like, for instance, Congresswoman Nancy Mace. And you might remember Nancy Mace. She was the member of Congress who got attention briefly last year for wearing a scarlet A on her shirt because she hasn't actually read the Scarlet Letter, or if she has no idea what it was about and lacks basic media comprehension, as is the case with many people, unfortunately, who share her worldview. And she thought it was an appropriate thing to wear a scarlet A because other Republicans had been kind of mean to her, I guess, for voting to oust Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. So she was like, it's just like the Scarlet Letter. Okay, Nancy, great. But anyway, it's her. It's her. She introduced a resolution to ban trans people from using the right bathroom. Now, that's not how she would phrase it, but that's how I would phrase it because I value truth and accuracy. And this is clearly and admittedly in response to Sarah McBride being an incoming member of Congress. Sarah McBride is a trans woman. As a woman, presumably, she would prefer to use the women's restroom if she ever had to use a public restroom. So Nancy Mace has introduced this resolution to change the House rules to explicitly ban trans women from using the women's room, and presumably to also ban trans men from using the men's room. Although, oddly enough, that hasn't actually been mentioned yet. Nancy Mace is all for this. Nancy Mace wants to ban Sarah McBride from using the women's room. And she was asked about this by reporter Pablo Manriquez, and she had this to say.
What's the mechanism for checking who's qualified to use the ladies' room then? Like, just sort of generally. Obviously, Sarah McBride has identified herself as a trans person, but what would be the, I guess
Here's the deal. Biological men shouldn't be in women's private spaces, period. End of story.
So this is specifically because Sarah McBride is coming to Congress.
That and more.
Kind of funny how she totally sidestepped the actual question that Pablo Manriquez asked her there, which is, how do you enforce this? Is there going to be a security guard posted at every public women's room checking people? Is that how that's going to work? Nancy Mace doesn't address that. She just says, she's not allowed to use our bathroom. Okay, maybe another Republican who is supportive of this has a better solution. Pablo Manriquez also asked about this new proposed ban of trans women from congressional ladies' rooms, and he asked this of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Maybe she has a better answer and a better, more practical solution. Let's see what she had to say.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace has a new resolution that would ban transgender women from using the women's bathroom at the Capitol. Is that something that you would support, or like what are your? It's a brand new resolution that was just introduced in the last hour or two.
Oh, gotcha. I support a resolution that keeps all biological men out of women's bathrooms, locker rooms, and private places. Not only here in the Capitol complex, our office buildings, but all taxpayer-funded facilities.
How does one? I guess the logistics question would be, how does one check if someone is qualified to use the ladies' room? Then in that case, obviously there's a new openly transgender member of Congress, but
right, which is
more
a
generally,
man. He's a man. He's a biological male, so he is not allowed to use our women's restrooms, our women's gym, our locker rooms, and our spaces that are specified for women. That's what this election was all about. This was a mandate from the American people that are not only fed up with the open borders, they're fed up with inflation, they're fed up with the economy, but they're fed up with the left shoving their sick trans ideology down our throats and invading our spaces in our women's sports.
Well, no surprise there, huh? MTG doesn't really answer the question either. She just goes straight into, she's not allowed to use our bathroom. Okay, so just a ban just to be shitty, just to be shitty to the one incoming trans person in Congress, just going out of your way to be shitty specifically to her under the guise of, oh, we're protecting women's spaces. That's it. We're very worried about women's rights. That's what this is all about. We're all about women's rights and women's safety. And that's why we want to deny the one trans woman access to the public ladies' room. And also, we consistently vote to rob women of their access to reproductive health care, which can save women's lives and makes living as a woman in the United States far safer. But never mind that. We really care about women's safety in this particular arena. Okay. But you know what? Here's the thing. As much as they might think otherwise, and as much as they might wish otherwise, Congresswomen Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene do not actually hold any authority over the rules. They don't make the rules. They can suggest changes to the rules, but they don't ultimately make that decision. What about someone who's in more of a position of authority in the House of Representatives, like the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson? Wouldn't you know it, but Pablo Manriquez asked Speaker Johnson about this as well.
Sarah McBride, a man or a woman?
Look, I'm not going to get into this. We welcome all new members with open arms who are duly elected representatives of the people. I believe it's a command that we treat all persons with dignity and respect, and we will. And I'm not going to engage in silly debates about this. There's a concern about the uses of restroom facilities and locker rooms and all that. This is an issue that Congress has never had to address before, and we're going to do that in deliberate fashion with member consensus on it, and we will accommodate the needs of every single person. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Good old Mike Johnson. How whenever you're looking for someone to take a courageous and principled stand, he's definitely the guy you want to turn to. And isn't it nice to hear him say that they're going to work this out among the members, and no matter what happens, he's going to make sure that every member of Congress, including Sarah McBride, is respected and accommodated. Well, good for you, Mike Johnson. I think that's great. Oh, what's that? Reporter Melanie Zanana tweets, quote, news. I'm told Speaker Mike Johnson has committed to Nancy Mace that he will not allow biological men in women's bathrooms and locker rooms in the Capitol next year by adding a provision in the House rules package. Mace is still reserving the right to file it as privileged resolution or amend it if that doesn't happen, though. Oh, gee, so when Mike Johnson said in that clip I played you just now that he's going to make sure that all members of the House of Representatives are accommodated, he didn't mean Sarah McBride. He doesn't mean trans people. He means everybody else. He means everybody else except the one openly trans member of Congress. You will not be accommodated, Sarah McBride, but everybody else will, so I hope that makes you feel better. And the reason why I bring this up, the reason why I'm even making a video about this is I know stuff like this can be discouraging to folks on our side, to people who have the radical belief that trans people deserve basic rights and respect, the kind of respect that us cis folk take for granted and would never tolerate being deprived of for a second. And it's frustrating for those of us who have that belief, who have that conviction, to see stories like this, because the truth is, if Mike Johnson and Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the rest of the Republicans vote to change the rules in such a way to bar Sarah McBride and other trans women from using the women's public restrooms in Congress, there's nothing we can do to stop them. They're in charge. They have the votes. They have the majority. If they want to pass this resolution, if they want to change the rules in this way, there's nothing we can do to stop them at this point. And that's depressing. And that's discouraging. But I don't bring it up to discourage you. Actually, quite the opposite, because I would like to encourage you and motivate you. But in order to do that, I need to remind you of two very important things. The first thing is, as much as this sucks, if this rule does go into force, and if Sarah McBride and any other trans people who happen to be in the United States Capitol and need to use a public restroom are banned from using the correct restroom for them, the one that corresponds to their actual gender, regardless of what gender they were assumed to be at birth. If that actually goes through, that sucks. That's inexcusable. That's unacceptable. That is a victory for intolerance and bigotry. And we should not be happy about that, and we should not be silent about that. But the thing to remember is, we have been in situations like this before, and conditions like this, conditions of intolerance, conditions of oppression aimed at marginalized people, people who have been discriminated against, they are not permanent. We used to have widespread, institutionalized, legal, racial segregation in this country. Now we just have informal, de facto racial segregation. It's technically illegal, but people get away with it anyway for a whole bunch of shitty reasons. But at least we've taken the step of making it illegal, saying you're not, at least we can say you're not supposed to do that. If you want to still do it, you have to figure out a way around it. You have to find a way to get away with it, which still sucks, and we should still do a much better job of preventing it than we do. I'm not saying that, but at least we finally saw fit to pass a law and say, hey, no more racial segregation, okay? You can't do that anymore. So it's possible to address these problems. And if transphobia becomes more strongly institutionalized as a result of actions like this, it need not be permanent. We can roll this back. We can fix this in the future. If Sarah McBride and other trans people are banned from using the right restrooms for them in congressional facilities, we can reverse that and put that right in the future when people like this, when these vile, hateful people like Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mike Johnson and everybody else who supports them on this, when they are no longer in charge and they are no longer calling the shots. We can fight this. We can put this right, and we must. And we have to remember that and be determined to do that. But the second thing I want to remind you is, and it's kind of important in relation to the first thing, is elections have consequences. The reason why Nancy Mace and people like her are even in a position to do this is because the Republican Party retained control of the House of Representatives. So yeah, if this pisses you off, if this bothers you, if you are concerned about the Republicans imposing these sorts of discriminatory policies against trans people and against all other marginalized groups as well, and not just on Capitol Hill, but across the entire country, if you, like me, find that these people are vile, bigoted, intolerant people with a backwards, ignorant ideology, and you do not want to see that ideology imposed on other people or written into law, or if it is, and let's face it, it probably will be because they're in charge, if it is, you would like to see it taken out of the law eventually and have that imposition removed from people. If you care about that and you want to do something about it, then you should do something about it. And there are any number of things you could be doing about it in the near future. But I'll tell you one thing you can definitely do about it in less than 2 years' time, and that is vote for the Democratic candidate in your congressional race in the next congressional election. You get up off your ass, you go to the polls, or you vote early, or you vote by mail, or whatever options you have available to you in your district that suit your schedule and suit your abilities, and you vote for the Democratic candidate in the general election for your congressional district. And you do that not because that candidate is going to be perfect, not because the Democratic Party is going to be perfect, not because that candidate or the party are going to do every single thing you think they should do in the ensuing 2 years. You do it, in this case, because you believe that trans rights are human rights. And that matters to you. That's important to you. And that's why you vote for the Democrat. And you vote to keep the Republican and the Republican Party out of power. Because I'll tell you something about the Republican Party. The Republican Party doesn't believe that trans rights are human rights. But then again, at least they're consistent, because it's been a hell of a long time since the Republican Party even pretended to give a shit about human rights at all.